Organic skin, magic dripping. Yeah, she's on a mission, keeping our culture lifted. Now you can watch and listen. Tammi Mac, Tammi Mac. Oh, what show is that? It's the Tammi Mac Show on Fox Soul. Tammi Mac, Tammi Mac, yeah, who that? Tammi Mac, Tammi Mac, hey, so you know it's Tammi Mac, hey, Tammi Mac.
Welcome to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Guilty, guilty, guilty. That's it. That's the tweet. Please welcome to a special edition of the Tammi Mac Late Show with our Friday co-host, co-founder of the Anti-Racism Kentucky Coalition, Dr. O.J. Oleka, comedian and filmmaker Alicia Cooper, radio personality and activist Dominique DePrima, and political analyst Ed Sanders. Guilty, guilty, guilty. That's it. That's the tweet. How does Black America feel about this, and why should Black people care that Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all three counts? Let me lay them down to you. George Floyd's murderer, found guilty on all three counts: second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Why should Black people care about this? Dr. O.J. Oleka.
Well, Black people should care because, first and foremost, for the first time in a long time for a lot of us, we can say the system worked in a good and positive way for our community. It says very clearly and very poignantly that if you murder a Black person, if you take a Black body and you do not value it, that it's a crime. And that's something that we needed to know was true. It's something we needed to believe was possible. And now today, we can be proud, at least for this brief moment, in this instance, everyone across the political spectrum, we can be proud to be Americans because of what our criminal justice system did for us today.
Ed.
I think I share some of that sentiment. I think relief is a better adjective. This could have been much different. I think a lot of us expected something different out of this justice system. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that the justice system now values African Americans. It took an incredible, inordinate amount of expression by this country. There were summers of marches and protests and just a complete upheaval of our social fabric around this case. And this case actually needed to be videotaped, for the videotape for everyone to be seen in plain view in order to get this conviction. There's so many other cases where this has not been the outcome. But in this case, I think today, relief.
Alicia.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Ed said. It's just that as African Americans, we can never get too happy about anything. Excuse me, because if you think about the Laquan McDonald situation in Chicago, he shot that teenager on camera 19 times. He got 6.5 years. So, excuse me, where we are right now, we're waiting for the sentencing phase. We all remember what happened with Latasha Harlan's case when the Asian store owner shot a child in the back of her head as she was exiting a convenience store and got probation. So we're still waiting. Yeah, part one feels cool right now. We did achieve something, but we still have to finish this out. I'm waiting for the sentencing phase. This judge made me nervous because he wouldn't let certain things in, like Chauvin's 18 infractions in his police record in 19 years, but he let in everything negative about George Floyd. So I'm a little suspicious about this judge. So part one is good. I just need him to finish this off with a part two.
Dominique, why should Black people care about these three counts of guilty?
I think we care because of Oscar Grant. I think we care because of Latasha Harlins. I think we care because of Rodney King. I think we care because of Trayvon Martin. I think we care because, as George Floyd's one of his brothers said today, because of Emmett Till. I think we care because we have watched time and time again as horrific things unfold and our justice system has not done right by us. And while we watch a parallel system of justice that seems to be just fine for white people, I do agree with Ed in the fact that, yes, I'm relieved and I'm glad at this verdict, but there's a side of me that says, why should we be jubilant just to receive what every other American expects? from the justice system. What we're asking is to be treated like human beings. And so when that happens, we have a parade. I mean, I feel like we're celebrating something that should be a given.
Right. Chauvin faces up to 40 years in prison for second-degree murder, up to 25 years for third-degree murder, and up to 10 years for second-degree manslaughter. You know, I hate to say, what do you got? Like this is, you know, stakes and odds in Vegas. But what do you think this will be his consequences?
I mean, I would like to see him get 40 years. That's what I would like to see, you know, but the justice system hasn't given me any faith in a verdict like that. And I always thought he should have been charged with first-degree murder, because when they told that man that he had no pulse and should we turn him to the side, he was like, no, he's staying right here. And that was around the 6-minute mark of the video. And he stayed on that man's neck for almost 4 more minutes. At the time when you could have made a different decision and you didn't, I felt like it became first degree. So, you know, I would have liked to see a first-degree charge listed along with the other charges, because it became premeditated if it wasn't already premeditated when he knew the man was dead. And then even when the EMTs showed up, they had to bang him on his arm a few times before he would get up then. So, yeah, 40 years. 40.
Dr. Oleka?
Well, I would agree. I think the maximum sentence would be best. I don't think that's what he'll get. I'd imagine the judge would probably go lower than that. Again, we are still talking about the fact that this was a police officer. Police officers are rather protected, as we all know, within our justice system. So it's unlikely that he gets 40 years. But I think the ongoing benefit here is to see what happens with the other officers involved in the situation, and with other instances across the country where you might not have all the video, but again, you have now the sentiment and you have a case that we can at least point to in different instances to say, this is what happened when this police officer had this particular situation. Again, all cases are different, but I think the larger benefit here, not only do I think that there will be a significant number of years, I certainly hope so, that Derek Chauvin gets when he goes to prison, but also that there will be this opportunity to use this case for the other officers who were involved in other cases in the future.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think, you know, one, in this case, this officer was particularly vicious, and I would say the maximum in terms of a sentence, right? This was really, just as Joe Biden said today, murder in plain light, or in full day. I think using this case as a message to other officers is also important. I think you can see from some of the reactions from police associations across the country, there is an attempt to say that this case shows that the system works, but in the very same statements, there also you could see the anger that police, the common officer, has at this whole trial. Their statements are going after politicians. And so, you know, I think there's still a lot of work to do with rank and file officers, and a maximum sentence for Officer Chauvin to really brings that point home.
I have to be honest, this verdict scares me a little bit, because I believe that police may retaliate. They don't like it when you go after their own. And so I have a feeling that I'm more scared now than I've ever been.
Well, I would hope not. I mean, in terms of police retaliating, that would certainly be a foolish decision. I'm one of those who doesn't believe that most police officers behave in this manner. There's certainly a larger number than we would like, and we should all obviously root them all out. But I think when you do have the National Fraternal Order of Police president, that's the police union, when you have that individual saying that there was due process, that the trial was fair, that justice was served, that in itself is a signal to rank and file police officers. This was a bad cop. This was a guy who did not do the job well. He did not do us justice. This would be officers talking to themselves. And I think that's important. And I think right now is an opportunity for police officers and for the communities that they serve to come together and say, we have to do better as officers in serving the people, and working together to figure out how to do that.
Listen, Dr. Oleka, that sounds mighty white of you. I mean, come on. You painted a perfect picture of what should happen of what should have always been happening, but has not been happening. And so to say that, look, this is how the justice system worked, it worked out, everything will be fine, police don't, are going to accept this. I don't believe that police will accept it, because now we're looking at the police and the policies, and we're looking at taking away some of the advantages that have helped them get out of situations when they've done wrong. We're looking at changing the policies that allow them to no longer cover up things that have been covered up. And so now we have to internally look at the police, and I can't imagine that they're not upset, that they're not mad, that they're not like, well, damn it, now we've got to do something. This damn George Floyd and Derek Chauvin, we've got to rearrange everything. I can't imagine that they're all happy and gleefully going, whew, I'm so happy we got a bad one out. I just don't see it that way.
And I agree with you, Tammy. I think what you're not hearing and from officers is that, yeah, there was a bad one. This was a bad guy. They're saying that the system worked and that sort of thing. But what's not clear is that you haven't heard from police leaders that Derek Chauvin was a murderer, and he wore the badge, and he used the badge to try to cover up a murder and protect him from the murder. And that's a very important element. What I think we've been asking of this justice system for years is that you don't use the shield to protect murderers. And that doesn't seem to be coming out of any of the police unions that have spoken out on this.
Dominique?
Well, I also think there's another thing going on here, and it's reflecting in the conversation between Dr. Oleka and Dr. Tammi Mac, which is that, a lot of police officers have testified. A lot of them have come out and said, this is terrible, this is egregious. But what they want to do is they want to go with Dr. Oleka's bad apple theory, which means we can just say there's one or two bad cops, everyone else is good, and not look at the system. And we know it's systemic because we keep getting the same results over and over and over again. If they say it's just that, Derek Chauvin was this terrible, horrible, Hannibal Lecter, and the rest of us are fine, then that allows us to pretend that nothing's going on. But we know better. We know better. Dante Wright knows better. Dijon Kazee knows better. There's so many cases like this day in, day out. So I think we have to look at the system. And if we say, oh, well, the system worked, so nothing to see here, then that's a problem, because it stops us in our tracks with the hard fought progress that we've been making towards rooting out and acknowledging systemic racism in policing, in schools, in education, in banking, and in America.
Yeah. Attorney Ben Crump and George Floyd's family released a statement saying, today's verdict goes far beyond the city and has significant implications for the country and even the world. Does it? Does it have significant implications, Alicia, for the country and even the world?
I think we'll see when the sentencing phase happens. I think right now we're in a good spot, 3 convictions on all 3 counts, but that remains to be seen as far as I'm concerned.
So are you saying that this all lies in a conviction, in the conviction, because he's been convicted?
Yes.
Which is something that we rarely see. We've probably seen maybe 8 times since 2015 out of, I don't know, hundreds of cops who've killed Black people. So are you suggesting that the amount of time he spends behind the jail will determine whether this is a victory or the country?
Yeah, because he can get such a low amount of time that it's actually offensive. As I mentioned, the Latasha Hollins case, that lady was supposed to get a minimum of 16 years and she got probation. So it's some tricky stuff can happen. And that's why I'm holding out for the sentencing.
I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult in this case, Alicia, because you have the 3 counts. One carries a maximum of 40 years, one carries a maximum of 25, the other carries a maximum of 10. So how you get, 75 possible years down to a slap on the wrist, I don't see that happening. What I'm concerned about is this being overturned on appeal, or, and the judge planted the seeds for that. And certainly the defense is going to do everything they can to try to.
I don't trust that judge. He did plant the seeds unnecessarily.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and come right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. So Dominique, talk about the implications of this verdict worldwide.
Well, I think it's symbolically important. I mean, we are supposed to be, as Ed says, the human rights beacon of the world. And for us to show for once that a Black life actually does matter, that we will value that life and that we will provide justice, even if it's just an anomaly, which we hope it's not. We hope it's a step down the road of justice. I think that has a lot of implications worldwide. I've gotten texts from friends in Africa and other countries, Black people, who are happy for us. And so I think that's important. And I think it shows that our marching, our protesting, our petitioning, all the things we've been doing work, and they do make a difference.
Ed?
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I think one of the aspects of the summer was watching where the marches sprung up. I can remember seeing the George Floyd marches in London and then across Europe, really across like all the NATO countries, especially those that have benefited from imperialism through the years, over the centuries. I think there's a big impact to countries where they are trying to get past their imperial past. But you've got these caste systems where law enforcement in, say, South Africa is overbearing with the African population there. So I hope this case. I don't know that this is the seminal case that changes the world, but I think it pushes us down the road.
A CNN Van Jones says the guilty verdict today marks the beginning of the road to justice for many Americans, not the end. And he calls out Congress and federal government for inaction on racial justice. Dr. Oleka, how do you feel about Van Jones' words?
Well, it's basically what I was saying before. I think that Van Jones is right, that this is a significant moment for the American people. Again, to the comments that have already been made, the fact that this happened last year, it is a completely different result than a lot of people thought. I think different than what Mr. Chauvin thought he was going to get. I think what it signals and what it suggests is that these things within our justice system, our laws, obviously they should apply to us, and unfortunately they have not always applied to Black people, but this is a different instance. This should mark a change, a new day, a way forward. And I think that if you have optimism, if you want to be hopeful, that is something that you can certainly root for. I mean, I'm not Joe Biden's biggest fan. I'm not a great fan of his administration. The one thing that I am confident in is that this attorney general will certainly prosecute if there are instances where police are retaliating. I don't think that'll happen, but I think that this attorney general certainly will. The civil rights case is still ongoing at the federal level, which again, I think is also important because it would be another step that would signal that if you do these types of things, if you are an agent of the law and you operate outside of the law with Black people and you kill Black people, then you will face consequences. That is massively significant.
The only reason I was laughing, Tammy, is because Van Jones was trending and people were clowning him on Twitter. That's the only reason I was laughing.
I don't. Why were they clowning him on?
Because of his commentary around this case, and everybody was taking bets on how long will it take him to start crying, and what comforting words he would offer. So that's the only reason.
I would raise to amplify Dr. O.J.'s point.
Sorry, hold that thought, Ed. I got a feeling you Black people aren't that fond of Van Jones. Go ahead, Ed.
I would also amplify that, elections have consequences, and it's important that we talk about this in the context of a Biden administration. It wasn't so long ago that the previous administration had really done away with consent decrees. Remember when Jeff Sessions was the attorney general, he put a halt to consent decrees. And it was just this week that Merrick Garland, the new attorney general, started to bring that back. Coupled with that, he still has a couple appointments, and this is where politics is at play. Kristen Clark, who would lead the Justice Department Civil Rights Division, still has not yet been confirmed. And so, while the votes are there on the Democratic side, there could be a holdup one way or the other. We hope to get, the right people in this administration to push this work forward. And so, just keep that at the forefront as we go forward when we look at these cases.
Let me grab our chat because Incog is in here with us today. The whole system needs to be overhauled. Chauvin should have just been given a sentencing outright. Forget wasting taxpayers' money on a murder trial. Dude was guilty from day one. Was he guilty from day one? I want to go back to something Dr. Oleka said because I find it fascinating. Dr. Oleka, you said that you believe even Derek Chauvin himself was surprised by the verdict. Why so?
Well, I mean, if he looked around and saw the history of police officers when they were on trial, he probably thought that he was going to be in a good position. And we all understand qualified immunity. For the listeners who don't, it basically means that police officers, while operating as police officers, are pretty much allowed to do whatever they want to do. That's why it's so difficult in a lot of states to prosecute them successfully when they do something like what Derek Chauvin did. So he probably thought he was going to be fine. Again, his defense attorneys, they went through the traditional playbook. They tried to discredit George Floyd, try to offer different reasons on why basically his life shouldn't matter, why it shouldn't have been valued. So the fact that it got the result that, again, I think is a good one, probably surprised him quite a bit. But that's, again, and I'll keep repeating it to you, to all my friends, to all my family, that's why this is so important, because it is new, it is different, but it is exactly the way the law is supposed to work. It just hasn't always worked for us. So the fact that this is working for us is incredibly important, and I believe that it should be, and hopefully is the way that things go going forward.
Let's get into some things that happened in this trial that made it very unique and extremely exceptional. I mean, we can start with before the trial even began, and we can go back to the day that George Floyd was murdered. So the fact that he was murdered with the knee on George Floyd's neck, and that there was a camera there, was something very different about the video this time, because if we can remember Rodney King, there were cameras and it didn't quite work out for us. But the fact that there was a camera there on that day, the fact that there was an EMT there on that day, martial artist there on that day, a 17-year-old, a 10-year-old there on that day. All of these things are quite unique to me, because normally when we see someone or someone have an encounter with the police, there are these groups of people that gather around to watch, and even in some cases film, but we never know who those people are. And they oftentimes look like just a bunch of, ragtags hanging at a liquor store. I mean, that's how I look when I go to the grocery store. That's how I look when I go to the Cubs food market. You would never know I was this fantastic talk show hostess. That's not what you would see if you're catching me at the gas station. You know what I mean? And so all of these people just look like regular old Black folk who are, who have nothing going on for themselves in life. And then we find out that they too are real people with real jobs and real hearts, and have a sense of humanity. Like, we really get to find out that they're not who we think they are either. I thought it was just amazing that an EMT was filming and literally tried to offer up her help at the Cubs food store. And then what makes this case exceptional to me were the opioids. They tried to paint George Floyd out as a druggie. But then his girlfriend says, well, no, he's not drugs in a traditional sense. Drugs because of some pains that he's had, and we were prescribed opioids and became addicted to them. What fight did we just come off of where the government gave all this money to help with the opioid fight? So this is not, you can't paint this picture of that, this dude that was on cocaine, or this dude that was on crack, or this dude that was, smoking heavy marijuana or heroin. No, it's the very thing that America, the American government fought, or is still fighting, the opioid drug addiction war. So I thought that was really interesting. The whole thing and the way it played out was just so surreal. It was just so serendipitous in every way. Can you see what I'm saying here, Dominique?
I do. And it's kind of scary in the sense that Dr. Oleka says, well, the system worked for us this time. And the cops are saying the system worked for us this time. So do I have to have an EMT who specializes in chokeholds on the scene? A wrestler who specializes in chokeholds, an EMT, a kid filming real close up who gets great audio of me crying for my mom? I mean, do I have to have a perfect scenario in every way in order to get the conviction? I think that's a fair question.
Well, I would say, quickly to respond, Dominique, I think probably that you did. I don't think that you will going forward. And there's two things I want to make mention of. First, you can't deny what now we have all seen. And I think what that means is that every juror who goes into these situations, based on what the attorney says, they'll say, maybe this is like George Floyd. I don't have a video, I don't have all the evidence, but maybe this was like George Floyd, and maybe this officer was like Derek Chauvin. It doesn't get you 100% conviction in every situation, but I think people's eyes are open now in a way that they hadn't been. And the second thing goes to the fact that those jurors' eyes were open and the people testifying were open. Tammi Mac, I think you're 100% right that all those people who typically see police-involved shootings, they are real people, but they felt like they were afraid and they couldn't speak out before. But something changed. Last year, George Floyd, the situation that we were all in, it changed. And people feel like now, I believe, that they can come forward in these instances. Again, I hope we see it more often. There is one thing I do have to disagree with you on, though. I bet you've never looked ragtag in public a day in your life. That's the only thing that
I'm pretty sure she hasn't.
Yes, I have, my friend. I'm no celebrity. I don't care how I go to the liquor store. We're going to take a quick break and come right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. If you want more of this content, all you have to do is grab our YouTube channel, or rather subscribe to the YouTube channel. We've got everything there for you, live videos, live shows rather, and the latest videos. And also make sure if you like what you're hearing and what you're seeing and what you're feeling, give us a thumbs up. Alicia.
Yes.
You were impressed with Derek Chauvin's representation.
Let me tell you, that man fought the good fight. I ain't never said. I mean, they had $1 million in the budget. I don't know why he had to be the only lawyer sitting up there. I think he wanted to create this David versus Goliath kind of imagery. And that man, he tried to do what Jose Baez did for Casey Anthony. Just throw like 1 million things up against the wall and see what sticks. This man was all over the place. He even went to carbon monoxide. His nose was down there near the pipe. I said, oh, Lord. Even if it was carbon monoxide, that's just one more thing to add to the man's negligence. That's not getting him off. I mean, he threw everything up against that daggone wall. I was like, come on, man. He said something's going to have to stick. He was a drug addict. He had a big heart. You know, he was the crowd. Oh, the crowd was making, the crowd got him killed. I mean, this man tried everything. And I mean, some of the stuff was just stupid, but you had to give it to him. He was out there swinging, you know, ended up losing any damn way, but he tried. I don't know why he needed the whole $1 million budget to himself. He could have used some help, but at the end of the day, he was fighting a losing battle anyway. But I don't even know the man's name, but I just know, I said, this man is exhausted. Some of the stuff he was throwing out. There was a lady in the red jacket. She was a forensic pathologist. He tried to get her to say that the prone position doesn't kill you because of some study in Canada. And that lady was like, isn't that interesting? How did all those people in Canada survive? She wanted to say, y'all just killing Black folks for no damn reason. That's what she wanted to say. And so what he was trying to do backfired on him. But the man, he was doing too much. But I don't know who he was. He tried the Jose Baez method. It ain't worked for him.
Didn't work out too well, huh?
Didn't work out.
I talked about the 17-year-old Darnella Frazier, the teenager who filmed the bystander video of George Floyd's death and testified in Derek Chauvin's trial. We didn't get to see her because of her age. Well, actually, it wasn't because of her age that we didn't get to see her. There were other reasons that they decided not to show them in court. But she expressed her relief following today's guilty verdict. She said, I just cried so hard. The last hour, my heart was beating so fast. I was so anxious. Thank you, God. Thank you, George Floyd. We did it. Justice has been served. How do we feel about her and her mental health? How does she live the rest of her life with this? I mean, and it's not something that's going to go away because it has now become a part of American history. She has become a part of American history. How does that weigh on your mental stability for the rest of your life, Ed? What do you think?
Well, I mean, look, I think she's a strong young lady, and I think she will be fine. But you know, the weight of what she has seen, you're right. You know, first things first, she watched a person die, and you know, was 15 feet away while it happened. I hope that no one ever has to go through that, and certainly no one her age. You know, we've heard from a couple of the others that were there as well, and it was certainly the EMT where it was just this, what do I do? I see that he is in, George Floyd is in trouble. Should I jump in, or do I just respect what the officers are doing? And, you know, it's this challenge and this fight within you on your morality side, because they could very clearly see that George was in distress. You know, I hope that she's able to cope with that. I hope that this verdict and certainly, as Alicia points out, the sentencing, I hope it's appropriate, and that gives her confidence to move forward. But from what I can tell, she's a strong young lady and she'll do fine.
Because all of the witnesses felt like they should have done more. And what I found most interesting in the prosecution's case is that how he talked about how all of those witnesses still had a level of respect for police, and how all of those witnesses still thought the police would save George Floyd, or would serve and protect in the light of Derek Chauvin murdering George Floyd. They call the police on the police, which is something that I think, if I were a juror, that one I wouldn't even been able to get out of my mind. They had this theme going. They call the police on the police. How does that work out, Dominique?
But that was that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Alicia. Go ahead.
But that part was brilliant because they couldn't use this as an anti-cop crowd. You know, so that I love that narrative that they painted. But one thing I noticed is everybody who was there that day, when they got on that stand, they either cried or got extremely emotional. The one person who never got emotional was Derek Chauvin himself. You know, he had very sociopathic tendencies. Everybody's up here crying, their whole lives have been changed forever. You sitting there like, whatever.
Wow. Yeah. I never even thought of that. Derek Chauvin never showed emotion, but is that something maybe his attorney said not to do? Would it make him look guilty if he cried?
You know what? To me, he looked scary. I don't know if his attorneys told him to look scary or not, but to me, he looked scary. That didn't look like a person I would want to see in an alley. And to your point, Ed, about, you know, the young lady who filmed it, she got a lot of grief initially. For shooting that video, for putting it forth. She got threats, she was being disparaged, and now people are calling her a hero. And I hope that, along with the fact that there are these 3 guilty convictions, that will ease her mind somewhat and help her healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. I think that it was unique that she was there too, because I had to think about her being 17. We now live in a world where 17-year-olds or anybody under 20, and then maybe even anybody under 30 today, when they see something happening, whether it's traumatic, whether it's good, whether it's bad, the first thing they do is take out their camera. So, I mean, the brother that testified, Donald Williams, he didn't take out his camera. The older gentleman that testified didn't take out his camera till much later. The EMT tried to help first and then took out her camera. I think it says something that she was the age that she was, because she had the intuition to take out her camera as soon as she saw something. And I don't think older people have that intuition. What do you think about that, Dr. Oleka?
Well, I think you're right that young people are certainly now more predisposed to film something whenever they see it. Again, if it is something traumatic or something dramatic or entertaining, they certainly want to capture it on camera, which I think is a good thing with regard to holding elected officials, holding government officials accountable. And police officers obviously fit within that boat. And I think that what you'll see going forward, and we've already seen it, is more people doing more of that. And to the point about the young lady, I mean, I agree with Dominique. I think the strength that she went through, that she developed over time, would have been this past year. First, from being able to film that entire thing as long as she did, to capture it all, and then to deal with everything that she dealt with this past year. So I hope and pray that she is better off now, having gone through everything that she would have gone through the last year.
Yeah. And another teenager that we have to send them some prayers for is the gentleman who took the $20 and has quit cup foods. Yes. He was a teenager at the time too, and he's struggling and tormented, and he's saying he wish he hadn't taken it, or he wish he had just took $20 off his check. That young boy is having mental health issues too, and was also a teenager at the time.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break and come right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Well, everyone was upset at Maxine Waters for diving into, well, not everyone, the judge and the defense were upset at Representative Maxine Waters for jumping into the whole George Floyd, Derek Chauvin trial. But we also got some politicians today after the trial to jump in. Vice President Harris delivered remarks on the Chauvin verdict. She said, "Today we feel a sigh of relief. Still, it cannot take away the pain. A measure of justice isn't the same as equal justice. This verdict brings us a step closer. And the fact is, we still have work to do. We still must reform the system," Harris said in remarks at the White House. The George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. This bill would hold law enforcement accountable and help build trust between law enforcement and our communities, she said about the bill she introduced last summer when she was a senator. The bill is a part of George Floyd's legacy. Dominique, I was thinking about this. I know you're heavy on this bill. Do we have to name it George Floyd? Can we name it SR 13 and then maybe they won't even read it and we could get it passed?
Well, it's already been passed through the House as the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act twice. And so now the Senate has to pass it. I guess they could rename it, but it might be a little late for that.
They have a problem, anything named after a Black person. I mean, John Lewis's bill hasn't even gotten passed yet.
Yeah, well, that's true. It's a tough sell anyway, because sorry, Dr. Oleka, but most Republicans just aren't ready to make a commitment to this type of real police reform in the sense of policy on a national level. I interviewed the chief of police for Los Angeles late last week, and he was saying, well, if we could tweak the qualified immunity piece, that he would support it. In other words, that was his sticking point. And there's so many things in this bill that Republicans generally don't support. It would be amazing if it did pass, but it's going to be a tough sell.
It's also important to remember that if it's not going to pass in the Senate, it's because Democrats also don't support it to some degree. The Senate is split right now, 50-50. If every Democrat was supportive of it, then it'd be deadlocked 50-50. And then the vice president, obviously Vice President Harris, who authored the bill last year, would sign and it would pass. But
well, I don't consider Joe Manchin a Democrat. So.
I know you don't consider Joe Manchin a Democrat. He is one, and it is great that he is, because it makes it clear that there is a bipartisan effort to block the Biden agenda.
Yeah, he's a dino.
Well,
Democrat
he is a
name
Democrat.
only.
He's from West Virginia. That's how his state wants him to be and how his state wants him to vote. But I think that there is a middle ground on this. I mean, again, this isn't the bill that I would push forward. I think the Justice Act that Senator Scott pushed last year could be one that might pass. But I think what you can do is deal with the qualified immunity piece in a separate bill, or tweak it this time to get more support so you have your watershed moment, and then you can fight the other fights later. Again, I'm a big believer that processes can work. It's shocking. Again, a conservative would believe that systems can be useful. But I think if you do that, then you actually have momentum to do real change later, and you really start to find people who, if they say they can't support it, even though the police unions would, even though qualified immunity was tweaked, then you can figure out exactly who's with you and who's not on this big, broad issue.
I don't know about that later. Martin Luther King was like, I'm tired of hearing about later. I mean, he said it more eloquently than I did just then. But he was like, y'all keep saying later, later, later. No, justice needs to be served now. I don't know about later, but that is an idea, though, Dominique. Why can't we tweak the bill and get it passed and then go back and look at
of course, they're negotiating that now. They've been constantly negotiating it. I think if more Republicans were like Dr. Oleka, that could be possible. But right now you're dealing with the Mitch McConnell hardcore QAnon, right-wing, racist Republican Party of Donald Trump. And thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord, that he is not president. And I don't have to listen to what he has to say about the Chauvin verdict right now.
Whew. I didn't even think about it, but you're absolutely right.
No
Yeah,
tweets,
it was so classy
nothing.
to see Joe Biden call the family as soon as the verdict was read. It was like adults, or it was just so classy. Like we could never see Donald Trump doing something that responsible and classy. It just felt good, like we harkened back to a better day.
Oh my. President Biden, speaking of Alicia, delivered remarks on Chauvin's verdict as well. He said it was a murder in the full light of day, and it ripped the blinders off the whole world to see the systemic racism, a stain on our nation's soul, the knee on the neck of justice for Black Americans. He recounted conversation he had today with Gianna Floyd, George Floyd's daughter, in which he affirmed that her father's death has sparked global change. I knelt down and held her hand. I said, Daddy is looking down at you and so proud. She said to me then, Daddy changed the world. President Biden tweets, no one should be under, or should be above, rather, the law. How do we feel about how he chimed in on this verdict, Ed?
You know, I'm impressed. I mean, it is an evolution for Joe Biden. You know, he has been in public life for quite a time. I appreciated his comments, certainly. I think about, the days in the Senate, and, one of the oddities of this week is Walter Mondale passed as well, the former senator, vice president from Minnesota. And you kind of look back at Walter Mondale's history and his connection to Hubert Humphrey, and how they ushered in this civil rights plank. And you see these leaders that speak out for civil rights. And this isn't a new argument. This isn't something new. We've gone through housing. We've gone through Civil Rights Act. We're now talking about the George Floyd Justice Act. This act is the next version of the civil rights fight. And it's so clear to us, and it's so clear to the rest of the country. To Dominique's point, I wish that there were some in the party that were like our colleague, Dr. Oleka, that could sit down and actually have a tangible conversation about this bill. And then even to the point of like the moderate Democrats that seem to hold this bill back. But I think it's going to take more leadership from this president and this vice president. You can see where they are. Their comments today really echo the sentiment of many in this country. And I hope they're able to turn the political mechanism to keep the heat on those that stand in the way of the George Floyd bill.
You're trying to get Dr. Oleka kicked out the Republican Party, talking about, We're going to take a quick break and come right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show. Welcome back to the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul, where we are covering the Derek Chauvin trial's verdict. Guilty, guilty, guilty on all three counts: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, manslaughter as well. 3 more officers waiting for their day in court. Let us not forget what happens to the 3 officers that were onlookers. We learned in the Derek Chauvin trial that one of them actually questioned Chauvin and his actions. Alicia?
He should have pushed him off, because when my liberty is at stake, I'm gonna have to do something. So now he's in trouble because he didn't do more. When he saw that man didn't have a pulse, I would have at least got up and walked off. I'd have called my boss, hey, this man don't have a pulse, and I don't know what to do, but I'm not going down. I'd have been like Nino Brown in there. I ain't going down with your foolishness. So yeah, and the towel, 2 towel, he was having a good time keeping everybody at bay. They formed a perimeter around a criminal, and they became 4 criminals. So I'm expecting on August 23rd a similar fate.
I don't know. Do we think that all 3 will have a similar fate, Ed?
Ooh, wow. I don't know. That's the I hate to say it's must-see TV, but I'm curious. I really do want to know whether or not we'll convict these officers and hold them accountable. I like Alicia. I think they're completely accountable for their actions. I can remember there was one instance in Los Angeles where officers had chased a suspect down and were beating him with the flashlight. And I remember seeing it at the time and watching one of the other officers stop the officer from hitting the guy with the flashlight. And this ended up changing the flashlight policy in Los Angeles. But what I remember about that is that officer actually reached off the pile and grabbed the one that was striking him. These officers had that opportunity. And it's much like the people that were on the side watching and filming, but more so, they were officers. And so they had a duty to protect George Floyd, and they completely laid down on that duty. And so I do hope that they're held accountable.
Did they have that duty, Ed? And obviously you and I agree on this, but I think that's the question that's going to be asked of them. And that's why it is must-see TV. What were they trained to do? Were they trained to protect George Floyd? Or were they trained to back up an officer who had the knee on the back of somebody's neck who was dying? And I don't ask that question flippantly, but this is how you start to really get into the question of what is the system training our officers to do? Yeah. Because if the answer is yes, we were there to protect this officer who we knew was blatantly disobeying the law, but we wanted to protect him as opposed to George Floyd. That's when you start to get that stuff out there in testimony, out there in the public, that can really be a long string and a long thread for unraveling the very nasty parts in the system that we know exist.
Well, one thing about this trial, we learned a lot about policing and the policy when it comes to excessive force. And it was clear based on police chiefs and police lieutenants and several other police officers that Derek Chauvin used excessive force. So if that is a part of the training, then those officers also knew or should have known that it was excessive force. But what you're saying, Dr. Oleka, is what does a police officer do? What are they instructed to do when they witness another police officer going against what is proper protocol, I guess, or
yeah, and also it's almost like they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. Remember, Carrie L. Horn lost her job from stopping a cop from killing a black man who was handcuffed and choking him to death. The black man even said he's only alive because of Carrie L. Horn, and they're trying to start a Carrie L's law where officers have a duty to intervene when someone is being killed. It doesn't sound like it's existing now.
But the Minneapolis police code shows they have a duty to render aid. They do. Yeah. Once a suspect is in control, handcuffed and under control, they do have a duty to render aid. That is part of their training. And think about how many Black and Latinx people are in jail right now for just riding in a car with someone who committed a crime. They didn't even know the person was going to commit. They are accessories. And it's a good thing Chauvin was convicted, because if not, their cases probably wouldn't have even moved forward. Do I think they'll be convicted? Not so sure, but I think they should be.
But everybody knows the backlash that Carrie L. Horn faced. You know, that lady lost her pension and everything. She just got it back last week after 15 years of fighting.
She's Black.
So, yeah, she's Black. But I also feel like some people are like, I don't want to be the next Carrie L. Horn. And that's why the system needs to be revamped from the ground up.
Well, but even before Carrie L. Horn, I think they were like, I don't want to be Carrie L. Horn, you know, even before she was there. Let's take a quick break and come right back on the Tammi Mac Late Show. Well, Hailey was on it. Thank you, Hailey. Well, we're not going to commercial. We're going to wrap. How about that? Thank you, Dr. Oleka, for spending this day with me. Ed, Dominique, and Alicia, thank you for spending an extra day out of it. And you guys better be here on Friday too. Just because you're here today does not mean you get to on Friday. Thank you so much for covering this special edition of the Tammi Mac Late Show on Fox Soul. Until tomorrow, everybody, it's a blessing to be in your box. Bye, y'all.